Baptist podcast we gather around to talk theology, politics, and the sweet banjo sound. Kevin Thompson leads the way, teacher and preacher too. With a men's quartet, the harmonies ring true. Gather around the mic, let's find our way, singing praises, strumming banjo strings all day. Amputated Baptist podcast where we all belong. Join the harmony, let it carry us along. With a passion for faith and a banjo by our side, we don't deep, we don't hide, we take it all in stride. From parables to politics, every topic on the table, let's harmonize together, let's make it stable. In the chord progressions we find our peace, singing praises, strumming banjo strings all day. Amputated Baptist podcast where we all belong. Join the harmony, let it carry us along.
Theology, politics, and a little bit of banjo. You're listening to the Amputated Baptist podcast. And now, here is your host, the Amputated Baptist himself, Kevin Thompson.
Well, hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm excited because we're kicking off our 2026 election season. And of course, we're also coming into not just local elections, but statewide elections in November 2026. And then we've got, of course, our local elections coming up in February and April. And I'm really excited about this guest. I've never been on our podcast before. So David Varnam, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited about having you on because I've been following you on social media for a while, and I supported you when you ran in 2022, excuse me. And so I'm excited to talk to you. I love your background. I love your vision here. And so I wanted to make sure to introduce our viewers to you. And this is the first time I've actually ever spoken with you. And so really, thank you for taking the time, and thank you for just talking to us about these things I'm going to be grilling you on here in a second.
Yeah, glad to be with you. I punched two of the list here for your issues since I was a theology major and I'm in politics. So, I cover two of those three things here. Don't play banjo, so sorry about that.
Well, no one's perfect, but we can work on that. And you went to a Baptist college, so it's perfect for the podcast.
Yeah, a graduate of California Baptist University, and Christian Studies was my degree.
So let's get into the first question I ask every person running for any office. I love the answers to these questions, but see, there's a difference between people like you and people like me. People like me will watch the news and get upset, yell at the TV, and kick the cat. By the way, that's a joke. I don't kick a cat. I know there are people who would be really upset with that. Anyway, including my wife. But you're the one who says, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. You're not just the loudmouth like me who likes to spout off, but you say, I want to be part of the solution, and I have some ideas. What is it that makes you run? What is it that has made you decide, you know what? I'm not going to be the guy that throws stuff at the television. I'm going to be part of the solution.
Well, first, I would say I think politics is a calling just like anything else as a believer. I think that God gifts us with certain things and directs us in certain ways. That said, I never saw politics for myself. This was a thing that it was definitely God-driven, but more to the point of your question, I'm concerned about what's going on in our state. I'm concerned about the direction. I think that we need a new voice and we need new things to be done in the state. My priorities are lowering our taxes, standing up for life, keeping men out of girls' locker rooms, making sure that parents have a choice and a voice in the education of their children, trying to increase our scores, our expectations, and our standards for our kids, and making sure that we're deporting criminal illegal aliens from our state and ensuring that state and local law enforcement authorities are working with federal immigration authorities to make sure that happens.
Well, I want to extrapolate a lot of that. First, I've got to ask you, you've got a great background. You were an alderman. You're mayor of a rural area. But before even that, I want to talk about you work with Jim Dobson.
Yep.
And that fascinates me. Jim Dobson, just a great hero of the faith, I believe, someone who has influenced and blessed so many people. Tell us about your time with Jim Dobson, because that's exciting to me.
Yeah, and I'm going to back up a little bit before that to explain how I even ended up there.
Sure.
So I became a Christian in college. I was attending a state university.
Hmm.
God used my now wife, Jessica, to point me toward Christ, and I became a Christian in college. I was trying to figure out what to do with my life and felt that God might be nudging me to ministry. So I transferred to California Baptist University, became a major in Christian studies, was still trying to figure things out, and really felt God directing me to apply to the Focus on the Family Institute, which was a college program. And I was one of 80 students, and I spent a semester at Focus on the Family. And part of that was that you had to intern so many hours a week somewhere. And it didn't just have to be at Focus. They put people all over. There was somebody in my class that was a zoology major, and she interned at the local zoo.
Hmm.
So it was all over. But you ranked what you wanted to intern in. And I was trying to figure out, is God calling me to full-time ministry as a pastor, or is he calling me to ministry in a different sense?
Hmm.
And so I put as my first choice to intern in the office of the president, which was to basically be an intern assistant to Dr. Dobson. And his executive assistant, personal assistant, called me to interview. And we did the interview. I was one of 3 finalists for that position. And then he called me back the next day. And he said, I prayed about what to do, with these 3 interviews. And he said, it is clear to me that God wants you to intern in public policy.
Hmm.
And so I have reached out to the Institute. I've reached out to public policy, and that's where you're going to be placed, because I think God wants you to intern there. And I was a
Wow.
little disappointed, as you can imagine,
Yeah.
but the rest is history, so to speak,
Great.
because I loved public policy. And when I was done with my internship there, I had 1 semester left after the Institute before I graduated. And they said, if you would like to come back when you graduate, we would like to have you. And then I found out a few days before I graduated and was heading to Colorado Springs that they had made a new position for me. And basically, I was going to be the federal legislative analyst for Dr. Dobson, because they'd never had somebody who that was the full-time job, just to track bills, track
Yeah.
movement of things, to be able to always update. And so I did that. And funny story from my first week or so, I was 21 years old, fresh out of college, hadn't even turned 22 yet, and had already done a memo for Dr. Dobson on a piece of legislation he was recording a broadcast for. And I'm up in the control room. He's down in the studio. We're talking back and forth. And he says, hold on, hold on, hold on. And he comes up into the studio and he shakes out his hand. He sticks out his hand for me to shake it and says, hi, I'm Jim. And I'm this shaky 21-year-old, like, hi,
Yeah.
I'm David, with shaky hands and everything. And it was unreal to me. But to me, that was God putting me on a path and
Yeah.
putting me in a direction. And I was there for 2 years. It was great. I loved it. But I had to return back home and marry my high school sweetheart. Jessica and I, just for background, we had met in high school, and we dated a little, but we became best friends. And so even though we weren't together, we were best friends all the way through. And then a few months after I left for Focus on the Family, we started long distance dating.
Hmm.
And it was time to go back because I was engaged and had a wedding set. And so I left Dr. Dobson, ended up working for a member of Congress who I'd worked with at Dr. Dobson, or at Focus on the Family. I worked
Yeah.
with their office. Congressman Gary Miller, a conservative from Southern California,
Okay. Yeah.
worked for his office for several years. And then when my wife graduated from medical school and it was time to go to residency, that's when we left California, went to Texas. And then after residency, and this is a whole other story I could spend a lot more time
Yeah.
on, but basically through the Christian Medical and Dental Association recruiters, we found a Christian clinic in Lancaster, Wisconsin.
Hmm.
And my wife had wanted to practice rural medicine. And we felt like God was directing us to Wisconsin, even though both of our families were in Southern California.
Yeah.
And we have lived here almost 15 years now in Lancaster, Wisconsin.
Wow. So I love that story because first it shows how God leads us in ways often we just don't expect. My life path, I thought for sure I'm going to be a pastor. And so I went to school for that. And slowly God changed that direction. Said, no, 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 you're going to be a teacher. And which is something I never considered. And then, of course, being the worldwide famous podcaster after that, but or during that. But God's sovereign will be done, and it's great to see how He works in ways we never would expected. And so I was actually born in Southern California myself. We moved there. My dad was in the Air Force there, and so we wound up in Wisconsin. Different route than you did, but I also like the idea that there are people who like to run, saying, "Well, I've been a resident of this. I've been born in this city, or I've been born in Wisconsin all my life." But you don't have that story. It's almost better because you chose to be here. You it was not necessarily your desire, but you came here and you decided, man, this is my home. I love this area and I want to serve the people of this area. So you're running again for lieutenant governor. Um, and there are issues I ask every candidate, and there are two issues in my mind. People ask, are you a one issue voter? And I tell people, no, I'm a two issue voter, but I say I'm an at least two issue voter. You got to get these two right, and then I'll consider everything else you have to say. And so I'm fairly certain I know where you're at on both of these, but I want to make sure our listeners know. So my number one issue is the issue of life, the issue of abortion. In Wisconsin right now, that is a hotbed issue, as you know. Since the Dobbs decision, we have gone back and forth. Our legislature has tried to pass bills. Our governor has vetoed. We've had the Supreme Court step in all of this. So, David, I want to know, where do you stand on the issue of life?
Life is very important, and I think just the fact that you know that I work for Dr. Dobson should tell you a
Right.
lot of where I'm at on the life issue. Um, as you referenced, I ran last time. I ran 4 years ago. I fell short, won a few counties, but at that time, and this isn't an indication of anything in the future, but at that time, I was the only lieutenant governor candidate out of the 9 that was endorsed by both pro-life groups, Pro-Life Wisconsin and Wisconsin Right to Life. I was also endorsed by Wisconsin Family Action. So those 3 endorsements should tell you where I'm at on the life issue. I think it's very important. It frustrates me that the left really talks about abortion, and we don't push back on the fact that you never hear the left talking about banning full-term abortion. You never hear the left talking about a compromise that would protect up to a certain amount of weeks. And I feel like we need to continue to talk about the dignity of life. We don't need to run from it. I think it's important, and most Wisconsinites support some sort of a ban. And so we need to keep talking about the value of life, because I think it's just one of the most important things, and we need to protect it from preborn to natural death.
Right. Well, amen to that. So you check off my first major issue, and I know you've already referenced the second. So I am pro-life when it comes to the issue of abortion, but pro-choice when it comes to the issue of education. I am a teacher here at a choice school in Beloit. And so, what is your position on school choice? There's a lot of people who want to do away with this program. There are so many false claims about it, but where do you stand?
I support school choice. I believe we should expand it. And even earlier in our little opening talk, I even said that parents should have a choice and a voice in education. So it's something I lead with. If you ever see any of my little handouts, I have one right here.
Yep.
It talks about parents should have a choice in education. I'm a big believer in that. I think that not only should parents have a choice, but I think it helps our education system, because it makes schools better if they have to compete with other schools for students. And I am a firm believer in what we have now, and I'm a supporter of expanding it.
See, and I don't even see it as a competition, but we're all working toward the same end. But there are people, I mean, I am not against the public school system. In fact, I think we need to better fund our schools. I think we need to reform education. But I'm not against public education at all in any way, shape, or form. We need a strong public education, but not every school can handle every student. And I believe that every student deserves to be in an environment that best leads to their personal success. And we can't expect that of any one school. And so I look at my own life, and I was someone who went to a public school, and I had a good public school education, but it wasn't the best for me. I had great teachers. It just wasn't the best for me. Until I went to a private Christian school, I began to flourish. Now, the curriculum was actually much more rigorous and more difficult, but it was that environment that made me, that just took out the potential that I had and actually made that a reality. And I want to make that opportunity for every student. We've had students at our school who uh, just floundered within the public school system through no fault of their own. And I would say even no fault of the school, but they came here and they begin to flourish because we can provide something other schools can't. And so I'm kind of rambling here. As you can tell, this is an issue I'm pretty passionate about. Um, but it's about the individual student, and what you said is really crucial. It's about what the parents giving. And I love what you said about abortion, where we need to push back on the abortion rights advocates. And one of the things I hate, one of the arguments I really hate against the pro-life view is, well, you're only pro-birth because you don't support every single program that we do. Uh, and they keep pushing the goal line back as to what pro-life should be. But why don't we do that with the pro-choice crowd? You're pro-choice. Great. You want to give the mother the right to choose. Great. Well, why don't we apply that to education? Why is that? Why can't we push back on that a little bit and say, listen, if you want to, okay, we want to support people from womb to tomb, so to speak, not necessarily financially, but we want to be there to provide an environment where people can flourish. So why aren't you for that? Why are you for a cookie cutter system that shoves everybody in the same classroom?
Students are different, kids are different, and even areas are different. I live in a very strong agriculture community. There are ag classes here, and not every school is going to offer a
Yeah.
lot of agriculture classes. It allows people to put their kids in schools that have subjects and classes that interest their child, or the best for their child, however you want to look at that. And I think it's good to have a choice. We have a choice now of public schools that people
Right.
can go to as
Right.
long as there's availability. I think that we just need to expand that, and I'm definitely supportive of what is currently in place. But I remember when I was at Focus on the Family, the education bill under George W. Bush came up. And I'm not going to talk about the merits of that necessarily, but I remember they were talking about having certain types of classes and mandating that you had to have X, Y, and Z, so many years of it, and it had to be taught every school, every state across the globe. And I remember seeing a story of this school district in Alaska, and it was only reachable by plane or boat some
Mm.
months out of the year. And they were saying 99% of their graduates, or it was really like 95%, were going to go into fishing. And so they taught ag classes, they taught water safety classes, they taught fishing classes, they taught, lots of biology. They mandated biology every year. They were saying this is going to hurt us. This is going to hurt the workforce in our community if you do it this way. And so I'm always mindful of that, because that conversation was more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But each kid, each community, each school district, each region of our state is different.
Right.
And what kids go into or what their calling will be is different.
Yeah.
And so we can't treat every kid the same, and we can't say you need to go to this type of school and you have to learn these types of classes, because it's going to be different for each community.
Yeah.
And we need to leave that choice up to the parents of that district and the parents of that child to decide what's the best education for their child.
Yeah, and I'm shocked that this is even controversial, but it does get to basic fundamental worldview clashes or who has got, well, even just saying the word God, who has the right to raise children? Is it parents? Which I believe, as a Bible believing Christian, parents are uh, to be raising their children, or is it the job of the state? And so let's
Mhm. And
empower parents. Um,
And as I said earlier,
yeah,
parents should have a choice and a voice in the
right,
education. And that's
right,
the other part of it is when the door shuts, that should not be the end of what a parent knows about what's being taught and the parent losing the option to talk about what's being taught
right,
in there.
right,
Parents should have full disclosure of what's being taught in the classroom, but the expectation shouldn't be that once the kid's there, it's the state's
right.
job and the school district's job. The parent needs to still be involved.
Absolutely. And let me say, as a teacher, that's something we welcome. We want parents to be involved. You have no idea the influence parents have. And parents, again, you've heard me say this before, you have far more of an influence on your children than I do, even though I may spend more time with them. The When I look at a student success rates, one of the major differences between students who struggle and students who succeed is parental involvement. So, man, get involved. Ask your teacher what's going on. Ask your student what's going on.
Mhm.
Um, Man, come and visit the school. Come, walk into my classroom. You know, it'd be great to have you. Okay, but I'm getting off on a soapbox here. One of the other issues I want to talk to you about is becoming. It has been an issue here in Wisconsin, and it's becoming more of an issue right now in Florida. Ron DeSantis is championing this, the idea of eliminating property taxes. I've read some material that you've written and or surveys that you've taken, candidate surveys, and you support the idea of eliminating a state property tax. Talk to us a little bit more, because that, to me, that again is another fundamental worldview issue of, if I own my home, I should own my home. If I have, man, someday if I can pay this mortgage off, I'd love to actually own my home. But now to me, I'm paying rent to the state. Just the ability of, again, private property is what separates us. We're talking about socialism and communism and whatnot. Private property, I think, should be a fundamental issue that we can uphold. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, and I would say this generally, and I led with it earlier. I think we need to lower taxes overall
Yeah,
across the board. I think we need to do a better job. What I like to say is that we need to be bold on taxes, and that I'm tired of hearing people talk about Florida because
yeah,
everybody talks about the tax system in Florida. We should be wanting them talking about the tax system in Wisconsin.
right,
And you even referenced it by talking about Governor DeSantis, right? We all know how low the taxes are there, and they're booming in population because people are moving from the Midwest there. We need to be the leader in the Midwest when it comes to
right,
taxes. And I'm supportive of looking at all the different options we can to lower our taxes, whether that's eliminating the income tax or dramatically lowering it, eliminating property taxes. There's lots of things that we can look at. We can look at eliminating taxes on retirees, like Illinois has done and some other
mm,
states have done. We need to be bold on that issue. But I would say this, if we eliminate property taxes, we need to be mindful that we're going to have to figure out a new way to fund local communities because
right,
right now that is how local communities receive most of their income.
right.
And that's part of the problem right there.
Yeah,
That's why some communities are dramatically increasing it and others are not. And it's becoming way out of whack because of that. Because the local control, and I'm a firm believer in local control,
yeah,
but some communities are getting a little out of control when it comes to that. And that's why we're talking about these issues because
right,
we have counties that are dramatically increasing taxes every year. And the tax levy is just going up and up and up. And retirees and people that have paid off their home are trying to figure out how to pay the bills every
right.
year when the tax bill comes. And that's a big problem. Uh, so we'll have to figure out that
So
because that's something we'll have.
would you
Go ahead.
support the idea of eliminating property tax for those who have paid off their homes, or for retirees? To me, in that makes sense to me. That's
I,
so I would love, I have a libertarian streak in me that would just love to end all taxes, period. But I recognize we can't do that. But if we can, if someone has worked hard all their life and they finally saved enough to pay off their mortgage. I feel like we could give them some relief. Would you favor a plan like that?
I think that on its face, that might sound like a good idea. The problem with that would be that then you would have communities that had older communities that wouldn't be able to
Mm.
pay their police officers, and ones that had younger ones that were trying to recruit people in to buy homes there would have much more growth, and it would probably create a cyclical problem. I have a 15-year mortgage that we're actually about to pay off, and we did that on purpose because I have a 16-year-old today.
Yeah.
Today is her birthday; she turned 16. But we knew that we could then take the money from the mortgage and put it toward college
Right.
once we paid that off. And so in a few months, we're paying it off. We chose a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage, and but we're still working. So it could create this problem. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I just think that we need to be looking at all things, all avenues to lower taxes. I'm tired of people talking about Iowa and Indiana in our area
Yeah.
being the best taxes and wanting to move there, retire there. In the former mayor of Lancaster, as you alluded to earlier, 3 terms, we sit in Grant County, and that is right next to Illinois and Iowa.
Yeah.
And I served a term as president of Grant County Economic Development. Guess what we saw? We were recruiting
Mm.
businesses in from Illinois, but we were losing businesses to Iowa
Yeah.
because they were lower, and they continue to be. And as a border county, that is a problem we saw all the time. And Wisconsin has lots of borders with lots of states here. Some are higher, some are lower. But I think if we can be the leader in the Midwest, we don't have to worry about, are we losing businesses to this state or that state, because they would all be coming toward us. And I think the more businesses and more jobs and more employees we're recruiting to Wisconsin, the better our tax climate becomes, our business climate, our budget climate, and we can start looking at cutting this type of tax and that type of tax, on lowering or eliminating the income tax. We can do a lot of things if we start recruiting in more workers and more businesses.
Well, this is the reason why people like you run and not people like me, because you're willing to look at the deeper issue and not just subscribe to the bumper sticker uh, claim. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your willingness to consider, but to also to evaluate and to look at what the bigger issues are. And so, Dave, we're running out of time here. Um, and I appreciate your time. But I want to do a part two because there's so many issues here we didn't get to that I'd love to. But here's what I'd like to do. And I'm going to put you on the spot here because this is being recorded, obviously. I would love to do a part two, but here at Rock County Christian School in front of my students, my current event students, who many of them will be voting for the very first time in 2026. And so, man, I'd love to do that and follow up on a lot of these issues and even more. So I'm putting you on the spot. Are you willing to do that at some point?
Come talk to your students?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you and I've even messaged about it. It's something I was actually thinking about recently, because I know you want me to come to the 8 o'clock class and the 9 o'clock class. And so I have to kind of be in that area.
Yeah.
And I was even thinking about, okay, when am I in Rock County next? And when can I figure out a time
Awesome.
to get there? Because I was thinking you might ask me about that. So
Yes.
yeah, absolutely would love that. I would say this. When I was 18 years old, I'm sorry, when I was 17 years old, I was a senior in high school. Our council member came to our government class, and she said, as you're a council person, I impact your life more day to day than the president or the governor
Right.
of California. And here's why. And she rattled off all the issues. If the water doesn't start, if the lights don't turn on, because it was an electric company owned by the city. She rattled off all these things. And I had never thought about that before.
Yeah.
And I have always been a firm believer, because of that moment and how it impacted my thought process. Anytime I'm invited, if I can make it, I go to schools. And I've been invited to several high schools here in Grant County. I've also done some schools outside of Grant County and gone and spoken to government classes, middle school classes, anything
Yeah.
that people will offer, because I think that's important to start turning the thought process about how important government is when kids are still in school, before they're voting, before they're out there in the real world, to understand how important it is to have a voice in government.
Yeah, and we've actually had students inspired to run themselves after hearing somebody in class. We had a student run for a city council or not city council, but a board type thing,
Awesome.
which was great because he would give us updates as what his race was like. And the other thing what I love about having people coming into our building and looking people in the eye, shaking hands, is one of the things I really have a passion about is civility. And in this in our culture right now, civility is something that we're lacking, and we really need to get back to how can we discuss our differences in a calm, rational, and productive way. And one of the things I think is important is actually to meet people, see them face to face, and say, look at this guy. There's no horns coming out of his head. There's not a pitchfork or a tail. He's actually a real human being. He has an eternal soul. This is person who bears the image of God. And I'm not going to trash this person that I can actually look at, see, and then, of course, I think the third reason why we have people in our classroom is I want to teach these kids they have the right to question you. They have the right to look at a public official, whether running for office or holding office, and say, listen, you're supposed to be here representing me. You need to know what I believe in order to represent me. And so, yeah, we really want you to come to our classroom and come and chat with us.
I would love to be there. To your point about civility, I agree with you 100%. And as I said in my opening, I believe politics is a calling. And if you're a Christian and you believe that you are doing God's calling, that needs to be foremost in your mind. And I don't think that God would do would want us doing some of the things that we see in the public nowadays at times. And so I always try to handle myself in that way and try to be that way to remind that my number one job is not necessarily politics. It's to point people to Christ.
Right.
And so I try to remember that every day, but it takes a lot of prayer, as you would imagine.
Well, and we will be praying for you. And David, you have my full endorsement. I don't know if that helps you or hurts you.
Thank you.
But we want you to succeed here. And I would love to see God use you in that particular office. But even if he doesn't, just being out there in the campaign, talking about these issues, going crisscrossing the state and bringing up this is going to be a help to our society. It's going to be a help to our culture. And so I want to thank you for just not just spending time here with us today, but also willing to put your family, and your energy and focus into this to bring up these really important issues. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And if people have more information, they can find me at davidvarnam.com or on Facebook at David C. Varnam or on X at D. Varnam. And Varnam is spelled V as in Victor, A-R, N as in Nancy, A as in Apple, M as in Mary.
And you are interactive on those. And so people can ask questions. We want to encourage that. I'll have all those links in our show notes. And so we're running out of time here, and I'm running out of battery on my computer, I noticed. So we better shut things down. So until next week, have a great rest of your week.
Amputated Baptist Podcast, where we all belong. Join the harmony, let it carry us along.